Deputies say Bible burning on Easter Sunday could turn into a hate crime investigation. Someone burned a trailer full of Bibles near the Global Vision Church near Mount Juliet. News 2's Nikki McGee has more from the pastor and also asks whether this could have been in retaliation to the church burning books.
I think the fact that they chose to do that on Easter, the Bible, was very in your face.
Pastor Greg Locke with Global Vision Bible Church says he feels targeted. Sunday morning, he recounts surveillance footage showing a trailer full of Bibles. He estimates roughly 200 being in front of his church, doused with gasoline and lit on fire. His security team would not share the video with us, saying they didn't want to compromise the investigation.
I think they knew that we were going to have an extra barrage of people that were going to be here visiting from all over the country, and so, it blocked the main entrance to the church. And so it was unfortunate. We get a lot of pushback. We get a lot of hate for some of our religious and political stands, but to see, the Bible disrespected that way was a little unfortunate.
And perhaps not just disrespect. The Wilson County Sheriff's Office tells News 2 they're looking into whether this was a hate crime. That will depend on if they find that this was a, quote, bias-motivated act. News 2 asked Pastor Locke about alleged book burnings at the church, including Harry Potter books, and if he thinks that could have played a role.
State law of Tennessee says that a church that would deem something occultic, they're able to, burn it. And so people hear book burning. Books were the minimal amount of what we burned. It was Ouija boards, it was charms and statues and amulets and all type of things that people wanted to separate from, that they would see as to be witchcraft in their life. And those books would have been involved in that.
Locke says his church has held roughly 4 of these events, mostly around Halloween. However, he says he doesn't think it justifies burning Bibles.
People, they threaten us on a regular basis, and Satanists and, people that claim to be witches and warlocks come here and put satanic Bibles in, especially on Resurrection Sunday.
In Wilson County, Nikki McGee, News 2.
The Call Channel, welcome to today's show. That video clip right there should obviously ignite a fire, no pun intended, inside of any real Christian out there, especially in the climate of the times where we see so much censorship, we see so much oppression towards Christians that nobody talks about because we're really the only ones being silenced. And of course, every single thing that comes out of the mouths of people like me and you is considered hate speech. So when I first saw that story, I was in an uproar about it. So much so that it wasn't on national news and they weren't telling everybody about the fact that Bibles were being burned. Of course, the anger and the outrage is more than just the fact that Bibles are being burned and they're allowed to burn Bibles. Those of us who have the Holy Spirit filled inside of us should be and are completely angry about seeing a sight like that. But then, of course, like any psychological operation, we need to pull ourselves out of the story and realize that the majority of these things are being done to gaslight us. And when we look at the origin of the story and we look at the ministries involved with the story, then we should start piecing together that, wow, they're putting these types of stories out there, lumping it with this new thing they call Christian nationalism, this patriot movement, this manufactured CIA movement of what a Christian is supposed to look like, what a Christian is supposed to sound like, what a Christian is supposed to politically associate himself with, right? And this is what we see in today's society, this Christian nationalist movement, which is manufactured by the Central Intelligence Agency, trying to align all Christians with Donald Trump, all Christians with the Conservative Party, instead of Christians saying, you know what, my faith goes into Jesus Christ. My faith doesn't go into the minister or the ministry that I go to on a Sunday morning. My faith and my trust goes into Christ, not into man. But they've been manufacturing people with the evangelical movement since the 60s and 70s, going back to people like Billy Graham, luring Christians in to a certain cookie cutter formula of what they're supposed to look like, what they're supposed to sound like. And now they've taken it to a new extreme. So we have ministers out there like where these Bibles were dumped, Global Vision Bible Church. And some of you have probably heard of this guy, Greg Locke. Greg Locke, of course, he conveniently is the one who had these Bibles dumped outside of his church. And it wouldn't surprise me one bit if Greg Locke did this himself, of course, for publicity. Because if you look at a lot of the backstory of Greg Locke, the stories that are out there about him are not things that shine a good light on Christianity. Now, I'm not one to sit here and do videos about other ministers or ministries, but I have actually come across Greg Locke before. People have sent me stuff on Greg Locke. Some of the channels that I watch do videos about Greg Locke, and it's hard not to see some of the stuff with Greg Locke. Now, Greg Locke, his church is called Global Vision Bible Church. And of course, his old logo, which he conveniently changed, I guess, once people who expose signs and symbols started pointing it out, is very similar to the logo of Freemasonry, right? They use the G in Freemasonry for God and geometry, even though I believe the G in Freemasonry really stands for gonorrhea, because I think it's a prerequisite for Freemasons to have it to be able to join the club. But anyway, the logo is very similar, right? The G for God, the compass like V in God, Global Vision Bible Church. You can see that was the logo. That's Greg Locke standing in front of a sign for his church. And of course, it has changed over now because he doesn't want to use it anymore. But Greg Locke fits all of the protocols of a COINTELPRO agent, right? Charisma Magazine. Here's some stories out there that have circulated over the last months or so about Greg Locke, right? Putting a Barbie doll, Barbie dream house on stage and hitting it with a baseball bat. Okay, well, these are all things that we can all look at and say, well, if it's making national news, and it sounds like the type of thing that if a regular person sees it, they're going to say, whoa, these Christians are losing their mind, just like the article says, are religious people. Okay. And Greg Locke, of course, is one of these guys who is completely MAGA. Now, some of the other stuff I've seen with Greg Locke is Greg Locke's affiliation or his attacks on the shape of the earth, right? This is a common debate amongst Christians, which I do not get into, flat earth versus round or globe earth, which people are allowed to have a debate about all they want, because if you question, a lot of the stuff that we all question, why not question something that you can't really see with your own eyes, right? So people debate this stuff, but Greg Locke's one of these guys who has debates about the shape of the earth, and then, of course, in those debates acts like a child, right? Because this is, of course, how they continue to divide Christians among one another and fight with one another while the world is burning around us. And, of course, more importantly about Greg Locke is Greg Locke's association with a certain place, a certain piece of land over there known as Bagel Land. And Greg Locke continues to preach to his flock about how we have to have undying, unrelentless support for a certain group of people without interpreting really what the Bible says about those who claim to be and are not, about the history of the piece of land when it turned into when it turned in and was named that specific land in 1948, which of course was all done by the CIA and by our government. So those are things that automatically make me look at this story, come out of the story from going and being very angry when I see it to saying, you know what, this wouldn't surprise me if this guy did it himself to get national news, to make national news, and of course to continue the left-right divide. But this is part of what they're doing right now with gaslighting Christians, right? That's why we have to be careful of these stories and understand psychologically what they're trying to do. They want us to feel like we are being attacked, and we are, but they want it to be so much so that they could align us with the Republican Conservative Party, with a lot of these COINTELPRO pastors, these compromised ministers out there who preach this white Christian nationalism thing, which again is all formulated from the CIA. But then if you watch how they act, and you watch the things that they say, they want to align you with Israel, they want to align you with Trump. This is done by design. This is part of the left-right paradigm that I warn about. And I understand that a lot of these ministers out there, a lot of these pastors out there aren't doing this deliberately, but many of them are. And this is one of those guys that's kind of a more known pastor, and there's a lot of shady things that surround his ministry. So that's why when I see a story like this, I immediately say, well, this must have been done by design, right? This guy must have done it himself so that he can wake up and tell everybody out there, look, that's what they're doing, because there's a lot of stories that circulate around him that become big-time stories that make people roll their eyes, not want to become Christians, and make everybody think that we're all crazy. And again, that's what they're trying to push us towards. A lot of the Christian ministers who are adopting into some of the conspiracy stuff, like some of the stuff with the outbreak, have been so outspoken about what's going on, but not being informative about what's going on. Not talking about certain things like graphene oxide, not talking about certain things about what the real goal is of GNA, just throwing things out there that aren't really necessarily factually accurate, making it sound like a bit of lunacy without saying, hey, look, this is what's really going on. Let's break down a lot of these operations like Agenda 2030, which is now Agenda 2025, and go into detail about these things that we do.
that I've got a dark screen I can't see and I'm driving. Be patient with me here. Can't see crap. That might have stopped the video anyways.